You just pressed play on the Last Breath Hunt Cast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 66 of the Last Breath Hunt Cast. If you have been in a party with a lot of deer hunters, been in a space, been in a garage, been in an area where you've been talking to deer hunters, every deer hunter has a story, and it is the craziest story that they have. Well, when Matt called and told me this story the other day, it was the craziest shit I've ever heard, and we're going to share it with you. So my guest today is going to be Matt, and we're going to talk about his buck that he just recently killed called Chubs, which he did off the ground. That's the only detail I'm going to spoil for you, other than the fact that it was his 7th deer in the last 5 seasons off the ground with no blind. So, before we jump into that, just wanted to remind you guys that you can listen to a brand new episode every Monday on iTunes, Libsyn, and Spotify, or you can wait to watch it on YouTube on Tuesday. So speaking of YouTube, that's a place that we're really trying to grow. So make sure you go hit us up on YouTube and subscribe. Currently, we have about 50 successful turkey hunts and about 35 buck hunts. And our newest series, which drops every Wednesday, is called Last Breath Live. And those are the stories that we'll tell on our podcast. And then you guys will get to see the videos on Wednesday. So this Wednesday, 2 days from now, you'll be able to see the Last Breath Live hunt for Chubs, the deer that Matt and I are about to talk about. So without further ado, I'm going to hop on the phone with him and get the story. And I hope that you guys think it is absolutely as ludicrous as when I heard it, because I just couldn't believe him. But the story is insane. It's what I think is probably Matt's craziest deer hunting story, and he's got a lot of crazy stories. If you've ever, watched any of our content on YouTube, been to our launch party, you've seen him. But this one I think takes the cake. So here we go.
Hello.
Are you ready?
I'm ready as ready will ever be.
Perfect. Well, we're live, brother, and we're going to lay down the story of Chubs today. So, I gave the listeners a little brief overview of the fact that this was your 7th buck off the ground in the last handful of years with no blind. And I think personally, this is the story that you have and Jesse has that are the absolute craziest. So you and Jesse have killed some huge deer off of the ground in the last 3 years, Phantom and Uh-Oh being the biggest two. And you guys have also put down 5 or 6 bow bucks on the ground between the two of you. And it's just, it never ceases to amaze me. So go ahead and give us the rundown of Chubs. And then we're going to see.
How far back do you want to go?
Let's go back.
We got some for the actual episode for the listeners to tune in and watch.
You're right. We're gonna go ahead and get into all the details today, and then they can watch the Last Breath Live episode on Wednesday. So take us back to the beginning when you acquired your new spot in which you shot Chubs at. Because this story, chronologically, it's not like you have a ton of history with Chubs, but you do have a couple pretty cool pieces of history with Chubs. So take us back to the beginning and work us through.
Okay, so there's this spot about 30 minutes away from home. It's about 200 acres on the main farm, and they've got a 60-acre place that's about a quarter mile away from their main farm. Well, I've been shed hunting out there at this place for probably the better part of 7-8 years, and just trying to build a relationship with these people. When you're shed hunting a place and you don't see any deer stands or whatever, the wheels start turning, right? So I've just been trying to come out there regularly, at least once or twice a year, even though I've never really found too many sheds. But it was just more of a hidden intent, I guess, if you will, to, like I said, build a relationship with these people, let them get to know me a little bit, let them get to trust me a little bit. And then it wasn't until about year 5 or 6 of being out there to where I actually started to inquire a little bit about hunting. So it was about 2 years of the owner telling me, my brother hunts, but he doesn't hunt very much, before he finally pulled the trigger on it this spring and said, hey, nobody's really hunting out here. My nephew hunts a couple times. He said there's all kinds of room. He said, if you want to hunt, you're more than welcome to. So it was about mid-February. There's still snow on the ground when we locked down permission to hunt. Jesse and I were actually on our way out there to shed hunt. We just happened to see him plowing some snow. So I just pulled the truck over and jumped out real quick, went bullshitted with him for a little bit, and came back to the truck with permission to hunt a 200-acre place in the same day that we lost our 200-acre lease that we had for 1 year. So it was a pretty good swap out, going from a low to high in a matter of about 3 hours.
Yeah,
so
and I think that's pretty cool too, just because over the course of the last 10 years that me and Jesse and Garrett have been friends, I mean, you guys have lost and gained permission on so many places. And I was listening to a podcast recently, my friend Jake Hofer and, Chad Jake from Exodus Gear, and that John Eberhart guy, he's killed about 50 Pope and Young bucks in Michigan. And he just said he's pretty much got the same attitude as you do, I think, about it. And it's just no use leaving sleep or losing sleep over it, just because more than likely you're going to have a new place to go as long as you go and you're adamant and persistent about asking for permission, which is totally your guys' MO. Think about how many farms that you and Jesse have lost over the years and gained. I mean, it's a ton,
Yeah, it's almost pitiful, honestly. You get permission to hunt a place for a year, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath of you just when you're starting to figure things out.
Yeah, I got a feeling that the rug's getting pulled out from under you guys, though, because you go and hunt it for a year, kill the biggest buck or two off the place, and then all of a sudden the relatives want to hunt. But that's a different story. So you get permission on Tennessee, and then you guys are on your way to shed hunt it. So pick up from there.
So we'd already been out there kind of poking around a little bit earlier in the year just to kind of cut down our walking, more or less, because this place is big. There's a lot of timber on it, and there's a pretty vast array of habitat that you need to be worrying about shed hunting. So what we did a couple weeks prior, we went out and looked exactly where the deer were walking in the snow, just so we could kind of narrow it down to where they're bedding at, where they're going, transitioning to the food, what they're doing. So the snow had melted a little bit. He was just tying up loose ends on a little bit of the snow plowing in this old house's driveway that nobody lives in, that he still owns. And we went out shed hunting, started right behind the house, and it wasn't a matter of 15 minutes. Jesse said, I got one. And he finds this really heavy horned, what we thought might have been a 2-year-old buck, because we don't know. We don't have any history on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
We found a really heavy horned 4-point shed. And it wasn't honestly until, I killed Chubs that we actually noticed that it was the same deer. But anyway, we found a pretty nice shed, found a couple other little smaller sheds, throughout the course of the day. And then we just kind of went on about our way, marked a few spots in our head, kind of where we were going to want to hang a stand based off of what we had seen as far as where the deer were moving, what trails they were using, where the trails are intersecting, just good transition areas to catch these deer going from one place to the other. So the wheels had already started turning there, and then they were turning even more going into turkey season, when you get a better look at the place and it's got some leaves on, and you're starting to really, really grasp an idea and a concept of how and why and what winds you should be hunting this property on. Because you're seeing deer when you're turkey hunting.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And I think the other cool thing, I mean, just a blanket question for you here. I think the listeners could, find a little nugget of information here on this next question, possibly. Do you and Jesse routinely, like when you guys are gaining and picking up a new piece of property, are you routinely going out even before shed season, like in January, February, before the bulk of the antler drop, to kind of determine where the main travel corridors are in the deer woods, particularly just because of the ease of seeing the paths with the snowfall and the snow being packed down?
That's what we did out there. I mean, it's exactly what we did out there. We're not used to hunting any properties that are bigger than 50, 60 acres, and most of which have less than 15 acres of timber on them.
Yep.
So to have a property that's got 80 acres of timber on it, we had to get outside of our wheelhouse a little bit to try to figure out how we were going to hunt some quote unquote big timber whitetails. And so that's exactly what we did. We went out there when the snow was on and kind of figured out what the hell these deer were doing. So fast forward a little bit to the summertime here, and we got a few cameras hung up about right at the beginning of September. We were kind of dragging our feet a little bit. We wanted to see the bulk antler growth rather than just burn up a bunch of trail camera batteries all summer long just watching these deer grow. We kind of wanted to see a month out before season, a couple weeks before velvet shed, what deer were there and what deer we were going to have. We actually started getting a couple pictures of some really, really nice deer. And the sad thing about it is most of which were kind of one-hitter quitters. You know, they popped in one time and then we've never seen them again. And there's only a few that kind of hung around, and Chubs actually was one of them. We had Chubs, we have Claw, White Earp hung around for a little bit, Batwing hung around for a little bit. Batwing and White Earp have both since then left the property. So all we really had left were Chubs, Claw, and Doc Holliday. Those are the only 3 deer on this whole property that we actually had consistent pictures of clear through the first month of deer season. So moving forward just a little bit, Chubs is we kind of pretty well narrowed it down that Chubs is hanging out on the south end of the farm, you know, within a couple hundred yards of any direction of the property. Mind you, we've got, I think, 7 trail cameras on the south end of the property. We haven't really dabbled too much in the north because that's where the landowner's nephew is supposed to be hunting at. So we just kind of didn't even go up there, you know. So we're really trying to put a bead on these deer on the south end of the farm and find out what they're doing, where they're going. And Chubs had actually started daylighting a little bit, and Claw started daylighting a little bit right there at the tail end of October. And matter of fact, they're literally in the field 100 yards from these people's house. And they're both routinely going in to this bedding area, which is like a 15 to 18 acre sanctuary flat that is literally right in these people's backyard. And it's on the far east end of it, it's a sheer cliff going into a strip mine lake. And then it just kind of dumps back south into the timber, into some little bit of rolling hills and some little thickets. And it's literally an untouched patch of timber. So the night I killed Chubs, what I did is I just kind of wanted to go sit just off the fringe of this sanctuary just to kind of see what deer were coming in and out, because the landowner actually took his bush hog in the timber and got rid of a bunch of the brush and stuff. So I could kind of see a pretty good little lick, at least towards the cornfield, to kind of see if there are any deer transitioning from me all the way out to the cornfield. And I had a southwest wind. So what I actually did was I perched myself right in the northeast corner of this flat. So my wind was literally blowing off the cliff and right into a giant ravine over top of any deer that could possibly get downwind of me. So I just posted myself up in the brush, and I've been sitting there for a little while. Had a doe and a fawn come through, busted me after about 10 minutes of feeding around me. And then she kind of went on about her way to the downwind side of me and went on about her business. She only blew one time, you know, so I was pretty confident that the hunt really wasn't totally blown.
Do you believe that the hunt is blown when you hear a deer blow at you? Is it at that point in time? Or are you kind of like, well, this sucks, game over? Or do you see it as being, that's just a thing that deer normally do?
Yep, because I mean, I've been in the deer woods a lot over my lifetime, and I've seen those blowing at bucks when they don't want to be messed with when they're getting chased. So it's the natural noise that these deer are using. I mean, yeah, they put them on alert or on edge for a little while, but hell, I've been blown at before going into a stand and end up killing a buck, you know. So I don't really call the hunt over just because you get blown at.
Sure.
You know, most oftentimes, which you're already in there, so you might as well just finish it out. You know, and then just see what happens. And that's exactly what I did. So, you know, I'm standing there in the brush. I've kind of perked myself in a nice little triangle section of these little trees. So to paint the picture for you, I'm sitting in what happened to be 3 little deadfalls, all of which were about 6 inches in diameter, just little small limbs that were 10, 15 foot long. And they just kind of intertwined each other and locked in between these 3 little trees. So to my north, which would have been where my back was facing, I had about a 12-inch tree. And then right in front of it, I had about a 3 to 4 inch log that was kind of laying diagonal. Part of it was on the ground, part of it was up in the air. And it was intersected between a couple little logs, basically pinned in between a 6-inch tree, another 3-inch tree, and then another 2-inch tree, just kind of all in a circle. So what I did when I first got there is I just cleared out all the leaves in like a 4-foot diameter circle where I was standing at, just to make sure that there's no possible way I can make any noise whatsoever if a deer were to get within bow range, because these leaves are all falling out of hardwood trees. They're all crunchy. They're all loud. They're all freshly dropped in the last couple of weeks. So I just made sure I cleared a spot.
So that would be
doing this.
Yeah, so that would be tip number 1 for the people who are trying to hunt on the ground, would be to clear off the debris on the ground. So especially, like
I make noise.
Yeah.
You need more than what you have.
Yep.
So I cleared a spot, and then I noticed there's this log that was right where, obviously on the same side where my back was facing. That one was about 3 foot off the ground. Well, it was kind of flimsy, and I really wanted to be able to sit down. So what I did was I had some excess ratchet straps from the camera arm. What I did was I tied one direction, tied one the other direction on this little intersection of where it crossed the 3-inch tree, and made like an X with my ratchet straps, and actually tied it up to an elevation where I could sit down and be very comfortable for the evening. And it actually ended up helping me out in the long run, but we'll get there. So the evening's panning out. I'm not really much.
So to back it up really quick, you're sitting on the ground, no blind, on about a 3-inch log facing towards what would be your north?
I'm facing the south.
You're facing the south. Okay. All right, keep going.
I'm facing south because between me and the south end of this draw is about 15 to 18 acres of sanctuary timber. So I'm trying to watch these deer transition out of the sanctuary timber to the food source, which is just off to my west. So I was just sitting there, like I said, the evening was kind of panning out. I was getting to that point where I was going to start thinking about wrapping some shit up that I didn't really need, because I'm getting to be about that last 35, 40 minutes of light, especially camera light, and I hear some leaves rustling behind me, and I've been hearing leaves rustle around me all evening, but this was a totally different sound than what I'd been hearing, from the gray squirrels and the fox squirrels running around. I'm like, that has got to be a deer. So directly to my north, there's a couple trails that dump down the hill and go into the big creek bottom right by one of our stands that we have in a transition area going up to this bedding area. Don't ask me why I didn't want to sit that stand. I just didn't really feel like going all the way down there. Honestly, I felt like being a little lazy. It was hot. I was just wanting to see more up top than I was wanting to see down low. But anyway, I hear just a deer coming up this hill, and I'm looking, and then just out of nowhere, just popped a butt. Like I must have just took my eyes off of it for just long enough to let Chubs actually clear into this spot and get his head behind a tree. And I'm like sitting there thinking, man, that is not a doe. That is way, way, way too big to be a doe. So I'm self-filming. I put the camera on deer, got it focused in, and then I'm just letting it record. And my focus is strictly on putting my binos up and trying to see what buck this is. So I didn't know. It could have been a 2-year-old, could have been a 1.5 old, could have been anything. Well, I leaned just enough to the left around this tree to put my glass on it, and I noticed that it was Chubs, and I noticed that he was a lot nicer than I thought he was in person than what I thought he was off the trail camera pictures. So immediately I spun back around to my right, picked my bow up off the ground, and I started glassing my line of sight. Mind you, I'm in hardwood timber. There's little saplings and stuff kind of poking up everywhere. So I'm trying to find my best avenue to tuck an arrow through these trees, and I'm not seeing it. And I'm starting to panic. I'm like, man, this deer is just going to start walking on about his way. I got a pretty good idea about how far he is right now, but if he gets further out to my west, I'm really going to be guessing. So I'm sitting there and panicking, like I'm cut the clip off a couple times, because he's only moved about 15 yards since he came up the hill. Like he's just standing there and staring at the field. And I finally get a spot where he's kind of standing in the wide open for me as far as the camera looks, but it's not the wide open for me for shooting. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what in the hell am I going to do to kill this freaking deer? I'm like crouching down, standing up on my tippy toes. I'm like, I can't figure it out. So then a light bulb goes off in my head. Hey, dumbass, you've got this log 3 foot off the ground that you've tied up to sit on. Why don't you crawl up on this freaking log, get up above this cover, and shoot this freaking thing? So I get the camera resituated to make sure everything's good, make sure I'm focused in, make sure the lighting's good. I hike my right leg up on this tree, and I made just a little bit of noise. So mind you, I'm standing 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot hiked up about as high as I could possibly get it to stand on this log. And this deer turns his head and looks at me. So I'm thinking, son of a bitch, this is over. This is over. He looks at me for about 4 seconds, then turns his head and looks right back at the field like he didn't even care what the hell was going on over there, because it wasn't enough noise to really raise his attention. So I freaking literally just springboarded myself up on this log, pinned my knees up against that 12-inch tree to where my back was originally facing, got my balance, drew my bow, and all in about an 8-second time frame, drew my bow, balancing on a three-inch log, 3 feet off the ground, using my knees as a balance against this tree, drew my bow, centered up, and touched it off and let one rip through the timber at 50 freaking yards, and I ended up double lunging this deer.
Just perfectly smoked him. So on the ground, self-filming, no blind, 7th buck you've killed that way, and you drop a 50-yard bomb in the timber, smoke him through both lungs. He goes down 80, 100 yards later, and you are balancing on a freaking log.
Balancing on a 3-inch log that was a dead log, like a dead oak tree had fallen over, and it was like a 3-inch tree. I was balancing on it. I basically had like my knees kind of hugging that 12-inch tree to keep me from falling off of this log.
I'm telling you, that is the most ludicrous shit I've ever heard of. I mean, I've heard of a couple people killing one on the ground, mostly you and Jesse's stories of killing them on the ground with no blind. I mean, that is a feat in of itself. But now you factor in the fact that you're by yourself, you're self-filming it, which is one of the most difficult handicaps a hunter could have. Trying to get that on video by yourself is no easy thing to do. And then you're balancing on a log, and you take a 50-yard shot, which is something that
I can tell you there was a higher power at will working for me that night. I mean, that's the only thing that I can possibly think of, is because all the shit that had to come together to kill that deer, and all the bullshit that I had to do. I mean, between balancing the log, almost getting busted, literally standing in the freaking, more or less the wide open's what I felt like. I got a lot of thanks to our camouflage. Badlands camouflage really, really, really saved my ass, I have a feeling, because once that timber starts getting just a little bit dark, it's impossible for a deer to see you with that shit on.
Yeah, I would.
And,
I would agree.
There's just so many factors that could have went absolutely wrong. I mean, I could have hit a limb that I never even saw 20 yards away, and then it would have been all over. It just happened to be right through this perfect pre-sighted out window that I had dreamt up in my head. If I got up just high enough, I could clear these saplings and dump one in there at 50 yards. I didn't have my rangefinder, so I just went off of what my gut was telling me, and I was exactly right. I stepped it off, and he was 50 yards right on the button. Once it got dark, and I walked over there and put my rattling antlers down where he was actually standing, because I saw where I shot him, because the leaves were just all turned up to hell. And I stepped it off 50 yards. I placed my rattling antlers down. I went to the truck, made my phone calls, and then I had to go 30 minutes home to get my dad and Jesse, drive 30 minutes back, and take up the track job. And it was probably the most disgustingly nasty, badass track job I've ever seen. This deer was spraying blood 4 or 5 feet out at one side. Mind you, I didn't get a complete pass through, but he was spraying blood 4 feet out his one side, 4 or 5 feet in the air on the tree. I mean, it was coming out big time bad. And when we finally put our hands on him, this deer had blood splattered from head to toe, ass to chin, all the way over his antlers. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And the NAP kill zone is the broadhead you need to be shooting if you're not, because that blood trail was disgusting.
Yeah, and you've probably, I don't know how many Pope and Youngs you got under your belt now. With this one, I'd think it'd be somewhere between 15 and 20, and that's your favorite broadhead, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to shoot anything but the kill zone from here on out. I mean, I've shot all the NAP broadheads, and they're all very, very good broadheads, but their top of the line, top tier broadhead is their kill zone. That is the best broadhead that they make, and that is the one I'm going to have on all of my arrows, even if all this last breath stuff dries up, 4 or 5 years down the road, I'm still going to be shooting a kill zone.
Yeah, it's a damn good broadhead. That's what I shot my buck with. That's what Jesse shot his buck with. I mean, that's Garrett's a big Spitfire fan. I've killed a couple deer with the Spitfire, and both of those broadheads are pretty freaking good if you're in the market for an expandable. So, this was on November 3rd, right?
Yep, November 3rd. It was 70 degrees outside, 73 degrees outside during the middle of the day. So if you guys are out there bitching and moaning, thinking that these deer aren't going to move in this hot weather, I've seen about 40 Pope and Young bucks go to the locker here in Bushnell within about the last 5 days. So the weather is trumping, or I'm sorry, the time of year is trumping the weather. So if you're sitting there thinking you need to be changing your vacation days, just get your ass out in the timber and go sit, because you never know what can happen.
Sure. Yeah, that's well said. There's been a lot of deer get whacked recently, so maybe it's just because of the readily available information that is social media, and we can all just see it in real time play out, you know. But yeah, there's still people killing deer. I mean, Logan and Alley, it's 76 degrees right now in Illinois, and Logan and Alley shot one this morning. Garrett and I shot one during the hot front. You did. Our buddies from the Whitetail Legacy podcast did, and that's just in our close group of friends here. So, I mean, it sucks that it's hot. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather it be 20 degrees in the morning and high of 45 all day, you know, like typical November weather. But I guess you can't kill them on the couch, right? So, November 3rd, how far did you think he went from where you arrowed him to the point that he died, Matt?
I think he got as far as he did due to momentum. So we're talking this deer ran down a probably 65-degree slope, probably 80 yards down that slope with a full head of steam, barely crossed this bottom, and then landed and died right up on this little knob, actually about 18 yards from one of our stands. So all in all, he probably went about 150 yards as far as the linear track goes, but 80 yards as far as the crow flies, just because he went so far downhill, and then he tried to get up the next hill and he just didn't do it. I mean, this deer took off like a scalded dog, and he, like I said, he had such a full head of freaking steam going down that hill. I think momentum carried him as far as what he did. I mean, he was dead before he hit the bottom of the hill, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I've seen the footage and the clips here, and I've watched it, and I mean, if you're thinking of a textbook double lung shot, I mean, that's what you got. I mean, right through
honestly,
right through both lungs, broadside.
I really thought I hit him.
Nah. I mean, it's not like
when he turned.
It's not like low lungs, like right above the heart.
Oh, yeah, when he turned broadside on the camera, that kind of settled me a little bit, noticing that it was basically mid body as far as up and down. And I mean, I'm 3-4 inches behind the front shoulder, but at first glimpse, I'm like, damn it, I hit him a little high. Cause he dropped probably 4 or 5 inches, you know, when I shot, as deer typically do. I was aiming for the heart, and I think that's what, I honestly to God think that's what saved me. Cause I mean, it had gotten pretty quiet out. You know, this deer could hear everything. He was already kind of on edge from looking at something that he didn't quite like up in their yard or towards the house. You know, I don't know if the landowner was out walking around in the yard or what was going on, but he was obviously bothered by something. So I was automatically thinking, you know, this deer, he's going to drop. So if you're going to shoot at him, you need to aim low just in case. So I put it on his heart, touched it off, and still was able to catch both lungs and make a really quick recovery out of the deal.
Yeah. I guess now that we've went through the story, I just can't get over like how ludicrous it is. And there's got to be some method to your madness. I mean, this is, like I said, I think it's your 7th buck off the ground, and I think it's your and Jesse's 8th in total together off the ground that you guys have killed together. I mean,
Yep.
It's ridiculous. And the fact that you guys can keep doing it every year is ridiculous. So there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something there. So looking at what we can,
there's a few things that I can give the listeners as far as what goes through my head when I'm doing this. One is wind. Wind is important. You have to put the wind in your favor as you do with any tree stand. 2, vantage point. You need to have a good vantage point. You need to be able to be seen. Also, in that vantage point, you need to be able to be seen without being seen. So that's a big thing. That's kind of, those two things kind of hold hands there. You need to be seen without being seen. So you need to find a good hide, but not too good of a hide where you can't see. So especially like down where the hole is, I mean, we've got pretty good visibility where Jesse just killed his buck. We've got pretty good visibility, and we've got enough cover to where we can't be seen. Like the other night when I killed Chubs, I had probably 100-yard visibility in 2 to 3 different directions. But I was in a good enough spot where the wind was in my favor, and if any deer were to be coming downwind just like Chubs did, there's no way in hell he could see me because I had a 12-inch tree between me and him.
Yeah.
Chubs, what he did was he came on the downwind side of this known doe bedding area. He came up, and I'm 99% certain he was going to scent check that whole doe bedding area by walking on this power line that the landowner has mowed. It's about a 30-yard wide swath through the timber where there's a power line on it, and it's easy walking. And I think he is just going to go right along that, scent check that whole bedding area, then make another loop and go on about his business. And I just happened to be there the day he decided to do it in the daylight.
So why do you think, I mean, we're talking about being seen and not being seen and definitely keeping the wind to your favor, but why do you think this tactic on the ground seems to work so well for you guys? Because it's a ballsy as hell tactic, you know, not many people, you know, especially with modern tree stand technology, modern blinds, not a lot of people do it on the ground, especially if they're on the ground. They don't do it with no blind. So why do you think this seems to work so well? Is it that you think the deer are like not suspectant of the fact that you're on the ground, and if you have the wind in your favor, they realistically don't know? Or there's got to be something.
You've got that, and you've got time of year to be a big key factor in that. You know, these bucks, I guess their attention's elsewhere. You know, they're not really paying attention. Yes, does are what you really have to worry about because they're always on edge. Time of year doesn't matter. They're always the ones that are going to bone you, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
But bucks, what we're doing this time of year, we're ground hunting these deer at the very beginning of the rut through the middle of the rut. These bucks aren't paying a damn bit of attention to what the hell these two new blobs on the ground could possibly be. They've got one thing on their mind, obviously, like anybody knows. So that's, I think, why we get away with so much, because especially when it comes to killing these bucks, is because they're really not paying attention. And these properties where we're doing this are properties we're not hunting a whole lot. Jesse's buck, for instance, that was November 1st was the first time we actually went in there to hunt this year. November 1st. So these deer have been doing their thing clear up until November 1st. We go in there, kill a buck that we've only had on camera for a couple times. You know, these deer weren't even paying any attention. Where I killed Chubs, same scenario. Not very far from the house. You know, nobody's ever really pestered around there too terribly much. You know, these deer they're used to people. They're not really giving a damn, more or less, what's going on because they're just so comfortable.
So in that statement that you just made, I think, yeah, so time of year. So you aren't doing this really like early in October. You're not cutting the knees out from under yourselves in early October, or you're not doing it super, super late without a blind. You know, like last year you killed Fade in December on a really, really cold day. You and Jesse killed him off the ground, but you had your blind and you were over some late season food, which is just a totally different strategy, you know, than the one we have or examining here. But you think that the main thing is, from what I've gathered, you said two really big points. Number one, you're doing it at a time where a buck's mind is elsewhere, i.e. during the rut when they're concentrated on does. And number two, the other thing that was a little more subtle that you said that I liked was about your, I guess, strike when the fire's hot type of mentality, in terms of the fact that, like, when Jesse killed his buck is your first time in there doing that. You know, so not only are you taking the deer by surprise by being on the ground, you're also taking them by surprise by just being there in general. You're not blowing in, you know, your good spots until the time is right, which is a hard thing to do, you know, especially because in, you know, a state that opens up even earlier than ours in Illinois, our deer season opens October 1st, but realistically, until the hunting gets really, really, really quote unquote good, i.e. the rut comes around, you have to wait a month. You know, their bucks are very killable in October. It's harder to kill them in October, but they're definitely killable. But you're saying that...
Oh, they sure are.
Yeah, but you're saying that you're waiting, essentially. You're being patient and not going in there till the time's right.
And I think me having a 6-day-a-week job clear through October really was a big contributing factor to us not getting in our spots as much as we'd like. We're only getting able to hunt one day for the first 3 weekends in October. I think that was a big factor. And us picking up this 200-acre property, had I had that property like everybody every other year, we probably would have went in there and hunted once or twice.
Sure.
But with having your dog's mad.
Yeah, he
with
is.
Me having
Garrett just got here.
with me having a bigger farm, that kind of drew our attention away from some of our smaller satellite properties. And then having with the nature of my job, I had a 6-day-a-week job I was working until I took a layoff to go on vacation for the rut. That kept us out of there. Our attention was elsewhere, and I just literally just couldn't go.
Yeah.
So it was a godsend on both hands.
Yeah.
I guess, kind of moral of the story here for anybody that's listening is these properties are out there. These landowners are out there. These people have been approached by outfitters. These people have been approached by people who want to lease. These people have been approached by people who want to buy their farm and turn it into a deer haven, and they just aren't having it. There are landowners out there. They're hard to find, but there are landowners out there that just want to know that there are good, trustworthy people taking care of their property where they can't.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just because in your section of Illinois, the outfitting pressure starts to get really, really, really bad. In central,
got one right here in town.
Yeah, in central Fulton County. I mean, if Fulton County's become pretty overrun with them in the last few years, McDonough certainly. I mean, everybody knows of Pike and Adams counties, which are down there by you. Schuyler County is down there by you, and all of those counties are just loaded. The shitter is fucking full of outfitters down there, and it does make it a little harder for people to at least hunt on permission, which, that's another debate in and of itself, but not that I have anything against outfitters whatsoever, but it does make it harder for people, I guess, that are balling on a budget, I will say, to find quality pieces of ground when there are people out there, paying big bucks for it. So I think that's a really good point. And the other good point that I think is made mention is like, you're hunting half of this acreage and all of you guys' other spots are totally overlooked, which we're going to get into a podcast later. Hopefully at the end of season, you and Jesse can come up here and we can sit down and break down each one of the properties that you guys hunt, because lots of them are what I would call totally overlooked. A lot of people wouldn't know that there's some big deer living in there, and we're going to break those down. But what are the big, last question for you here, Matt, what are the big do's and don'ts for hunting on the ground? What are some things that you definitely do? We talked about removing the debris. We've talked about having the wind in your favor, and we've talked about not blowing it up early, but are there any other things that you can think of that are definite things you do when you're on the ground?
Well, I mean, this hide that Jesse killed his buck out of, since then I had hunted there once or twice in there after Chavez, and I did get picked by a couple of the does. So what I did is I went to a property we have just a couple hundred yards away and went and cut some cedar limbs, and I kind of brushed the hide in a little better. I mean, it doesn't hurt you guys to carry a little handsaw with you, to whether it is to cut a couple shooting lanes out 20, 30 yards, especially if you're hunting in the timber. But sometimes, just to enhance your hide just a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be enough for the deer to be like, oh, hey, what the hell? That wasn't there before. But just enough to kind of break you up. I mean, break a silhouette up. Because, I mean, there are spots where we hunt, when the deer are eye level with us, they can silhouette us. So we've actually enhanced our hide a little bit by cutting down our silhouette some. Not completely, but some.
Sure.
So enhancing your hide is a big deal. I'd say your don'ts. One of your don'ts would probably be just do not, under any circumstances, go in there on a wrong wind. I mean, just don't. I mean, these deer are going to be able to smell you a hell of a lot easier when you're eye level with them. I can tell you that right now from experience. They are going to smell you. Even if you practice all the scent control in the world, they will figure you out. A buck may not, but a big doe, if she comes out and knows something ain't right, she's going to blow the whole shit before it even gets started. So do not go in there and hunt these properties or hunt these spots or whatever on a wrong wind. You always want to try to put the wind in your favor, or be just hunting just off the fringe of that wind. So it may put the wind in the deer's favor half the time, and it may put it in your favor half the time. I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, call it crazy. It may sound a little crazy, but sometimes, just like this scenario with Chubs, I put the wind in my favor by not putting it in my favor, because he's coming downwind of this bedding area to scent check the does. But I was in a spot just enough to where the wind wasn't gonna nail me by any deer, but the deer could still use the property the way they naturally use the property to scent check. If you guys can understand what I'm saying.
Sure. That's a hell of a good piece of advice as well. So you're basically saying put it in your favor, but give the deer the freedom to do what they are going to do on their own as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good one. How are you going to get Chubs mounted? He's going to be soon at the taxidermist at Wayne's taxidermy shop. How are you going to get him mounted? Are you going to sneak him up, or are you semi-sneak him, or what are you going to do?
I'll probably wall pedestal him. I'm a big advocate of the wall pedestal, semi-sneak pose, either right or left turn. The biggest problem I'm going to have right now is finding a place to put him.
It's a good problem to have.
I'm running out of wall space. I've got much bigger deer sitting in a European mount on the floor than I do Chubs, so it kind of makes me feel bad for these other bucks that should have been mounted, but I never did. Maybe, I'll get around to mounting them one of these days, but right now I'm going to try really hard to try to find the room for him.
I'm sure you can find it. You can hang it in Maverick's room. So that's pretty much it. I got some would you rathers here, though. You ready?
Sure.
Number 1, would you rather mount a deer upright or full sneak?
Full sneak.
Okay, interesting answer on that one. I think I would probably go full sneak over upright too. Number 2, would you rather see your best friend miss your target buck? So your number 1 target buck. We're not going to talk about your number 1 target buck on here because you guys are trying to keep him a secret. But would you rather
come back first?
He's got to come back. That's right. Would you guys rather see your best friend miss your target buck or your neighbor shoot your target buck? What do you think? What's the lesser of two evils on that deal?
I'd rather Jesse have a crack at him, than see the neighbors kill him.
All right, well said. And then my last question isn't really a would you rather, it's more of just a question. Do you think that picking up Chubs' sheds played any part in killing him? Are there any theories on that?
We didn't even realize it was him until after the fact,
Sure.
We didn't even put 2 and 2 together until after the fact, and I was like, damn, dude, I think that's that deer you found the freaking shed off of.
Yeah, and it totally is. It's crazy.
Trail definitely helped. Trail cameras were a big deal and killing this deer.
As they typically are.
That is the biggest contributing factor to killing Chubs was trail cameras.
Any particular strategy you want to share before we get done and wrap it up here?
We just, more or less, we just put a lot of our trail cameras in this place in good travel corridors, and we narrowed it down to which direction these deer are coming, where they're coming from, where they're going. And we noticed that Chubs never really trickled past a certain point in this farm as far as north-south goes. East and west, he's kind of all over the whole farm. As far as north and south goes, he really didn't pass the center point of the farm. So we knew he was a deer that was living on the south end of the farm. We just didn't know exactly where.
Sure. That's kind of like the same story that Garrett and I have with Geronimo. Just wouldn't break a certain line, but hey, congratulations on another buck off the ground, no blind. You self-filmed this one, and you balanced on a freaking tree limb and shot him at 50 yards. Again, I told everybody at the beginning of the podcast how crazy this was. When he told me, I was just like, I just kept thinking in my head like, and just getting more and more amped up. So I
showed Jesse where it was at when we went and hunted there last night, and he's like, you got to be shitting me, dude. He's like, that's where you shot him from? I said, yeah, sure shit did. He's like, what the hell?
I just can't make it up. I mean, we got video proof, so
call me crazy.
We're gonna put
it happened.
Yeah. People can't call you crazy if we got the video proof. That's what I say. A podcast is an accusation. A video is proof. So I like that, and I'm proud to be able to put our name on that content that's going to be rocking down the pipe soon. So thanks for going out and getting it done. congratulations on Chubs. Another, I don't even know how many Pope and Youngs you got under your belt at this point, but it's borderline disgusting for being 28. And that's pretty much it. So I'll talk to you later, buddy.
All right, buddy. See ya.
All right, bye. All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Any of our discount codes, if you want to hop in the Last Breath Inner Circle and take advantage of those, they're in there. We got a 25% off code, all Badlands gear, 20% off with code BLUE, and 35% with Outdoor Edge. Our public land series, parts 3 and 4, are going to be absolutely epic. Part 3 is rolling out tomorrow, which is Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel. Homie and Cody killed a buck on public, and they also saw what they believe to be a 190-inch plus deer on public, a deer that they called Magnum PI, absolute giant. And rolling on, our next thing that we have here is every single Thursday, all 2020 long, we're releasing a Throwback Thursday episode. We say dollar biggest deer for deer season, so be sure to check those out every Thursday on our YouTube channel. Every Wednesday, you guys can hear the stories that we're telling in here in real time on the podcast. So this Wednesday, our Last Breath Live episode will be the story of Chubs and all the stuff that Matt and I just discussed. So thank you guys again for listening to the Last Breath Hunt Cast. We'll catch you next Monday. Till then, don't waste it.